Teisha Bader, and in the news, 460 rockets fired on Israel in 25 hours, said to be more than twice the number of rockets fired than on any single day of the Gaza war of 2014. Several rockets hit homes in southern Israeli cities, including in the city of Ashkelon, where a man was killed and 2 women seriously injured. Over 100 Israelis went to the hospital, many suffering from shock. Schools in these southern communities are closed today, and the area's residents were told to stay close to bomb shelters. In response, the IDF struck 150 terror targets in Gaza, and later this evening it appeared a ceasefire agreement may have been reached. To help us understand the situation and to share her perspective and knowledge, we are fortunate to have on our phone lines spokesperson and consul for media affairs for the Consulate of Israel in New York, Almog Elijis. Almog, I know this is a very busy and very difficult time, and we truly appreciate you joining us here on JBS.
Thank you, Teisha. I appreciate it.
Thank you. So before we get to the current situation now and this talk of a ceasefire, can you help us just paint a picture of what was happening in southern Israel beginning yesterday when this barrage of rocket fire began?
I think we all experienced in the last 48 hours a very difficult and hard time because Israelis can feel it everywhere. And President Rivlin put it in words when he said, when the sirens are screaming in the south, we can also hear them in our hearts in Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, and all over the country, and I would say also in New York. But just to give you a little bit of background, what happened was that yesterday around 4:30 p.m. in the afternoon, and then throughout the night, Hamas, which is a designated terror organization, launched an attack on Israel and fired, it's by now over 500 rockets on Israel from the Gaza Strip. It's deliberately targeting Israeli civilians who live in Israeli towns and Israeli communities. And we had, just as you mentioned, dozens of civilians that have been hurt, shocked, in trauma. We had a bus that was hit by an anti-tank missile. And I'm not sure if you know the story, but it was actually a miracle because just minutes earlier before it was hit, we had 50 young civilians who left the bus. So luckily nothing happened besides one person, a 19-year-old soldier who was injured and was evacuated to the hospital. And like he said, direct hit on the city of Ashkelon. And the person who was killed is actually a Palestinian. The name is Mahmoud Abu Azma. He's 49 years old. He's a Palestinian from Khalul who was working in Israel. And it just shows you that the terror of Hamas is not only targeting Israelis, it's targeting all civilians.
Absolutely. I was reading that he's a father of 6 children. He had work permits to be in Israel, sleeping in this apartment during the week so he could, send money back to his family, and he would go home on the weekends. And as you said, the rocket fire is completely indiscriminate. It is being fired at Israeli towns, regardless of who may be there. Something the IDF wrote on Twitter, which I thought was really just a powerful statement. They said that in the course of 2 hours last night, more than 1 rocket per minute was fired from Gaza at Israel. And there's a video showing all these red alerts, just one after the other after the other. I think that's really one of the hardest things for us outside of Israel to really grasp because, we read the headlines and we see pictures, but knowing that you have seconds after you hear a siren or see a red alert message on your phone, seconds to get to a safe room, a bomb shelter. What is that really like? Can you give us a sense of that reality?
I have to tell you the truth. I'm not from the south of Israel, and just as you said, I've experienced it living in Israel or hearing it on the news or reading it, besides a few years ago when I experienced it for the first time. I was with my family in a little town. We were actually on holiday. We had visitors from overseas, and there was a rocket, and we had 15 seconds to run to the shelter. And I can't even describe what you feel at the moment, the shock, the trauma that you have afterwards, the fact that you're trying to rush to the shelter, but you're trying to take everyone with you, things you don't realize. For example, your grandparents who can't run that quickly to the shelter, or maybe the siren reminds them of other things from their past, as well as little children who don't really understand what happens, animals around you. So I think it's something that only once you experience, you can actually grasp what it means. And I mean, they had a horrible 2 nights now, but obviously it's not only this time, it happened before as well. And I mean, 250,000 Israeli children were unable to attend school because of the Hamas rockets. And just as you said, you know, when we hit in Gaza, we hit terror targets. We don't hit Palestinian civilians. It's not our aim. It's not our goal. But what Hamas does is Hamas is actually committing a double war crime, because they're targeting Israeli civilians. In this case, also a Palestinian was killed, but they're also hiding behind the Palestinian population. So they would shoot the rockets from homes in Gaza, from schools, from mosques, even hospitals. And it's just a terrible situation.
Absolutely. And it's a really important distinction, though, that you make, and that is that the IDF really, in these airstrikes that it does in self-defense, does everything in its power to avoid civilian casualties and to only hit terror targets, designated terror targets that they have checked and rechecked, whereas Hamas and Islamic Jihad are just firing rockets. They know they're at civilian communities, and, as you said, placing their own people's lives at risk by hiding these rocket launchers next to homes, within schools, underneath hospitals. I mean, there were so many stories that came out of the Gaza war in 2014 when rocket launchers were discovered in places and people didn't know that they were under their feet or next door to them.
Exactly. And I have to tell you, it really makes me feel that Hamas places no value on human life, really, because it's using its own people. Whereas with Israel, we're trying to do our best. The IDF really, I can tell you, does its best to avoid casualties on whatever side. It's not our aim. It's not our goal. And we also warn them. And we have different ways of warning them before we hit, whether it's dropping leaflets, whether it's on social media in Arabic. And we're really trying to prevent casualties, because at the end of the day, we're interested in living side by side. And I think every resident in Sderot or Nativot can tell you, at the end of the day, people want to live their life. I assume also the Palestinian population wants the same. But when they have a terror organization like Hamas, there's not much you can do. And if it's okay, I just want to tell you a little bit about Hamas, because it's important to understand it's a designated terror organization. It was recognized such as by the U.S., by the EU, by Canada, by Australia, by different countries. And, you know, they took over in 2007. Israel left in 2005. There's no Israeli presence there. And I can tell you, since the disengagement that we had in 2005, Hamas has launched more than 11,000 rockets on Israeli towns. And that's not including the last 48 hours.
Yeah, it's incredible. I do want to go back to Sunday night, an incident that Hamas is pointing to or blaming, saying or justifying this rocket attack on Israel. And I know there's probably not a lot you can tell us, because this was a classified operation that the IDF Special Forces went into Gaza late Sunday night for a mission. There's not a lot of information, but tragically a senior IDF commander was killed and another IDF soldier was injured. Can you give us any information about what happened Sunday night?
I can't really give you much information since it's a classified operation,
Sure.
But I can tell you Hamas is trying now to point out that because of that incident, there's violence. It's not true. There has been violence for the last year. There's been violence since we left in 2005. And it has nothing to do with the incident itself. It's just another excuse that Hamas is looking for, as usual, to point the blame towards Israel. All I can say is it was a mission, a secret mission, which is basically was made to protect the security of the residents of the state of Israel. Unfortunately, we lost someone. We lost a lieutenant colonel. And yes, it's a very, very tragic situation. And I send my deepest condolences to the family of the lieutenant colonel.
And we send them as well to you and to the people of Israel on this loss. I know we may not know his identity. It's not been published at the moment, but he's been lauded and praised and hailed by the Prime Minister and the President, and of course, obviously, dedicated years and years to service and protection of the State of Israel. So we extend
exactly. And he was also a Druze, one of the minorities who live peacefully in Israel. And it just shows you in Israel we treat everyone equally. He was serving in the army in a very high position. And that's all we want. We want to live in peace side by side.
I did not know he was Druze, and that is a very, I appreciate you saying that, because it is a people that is devoted to the State of Israel. They have given so many years of service to the state and have sacrificed so much as well. And we definitely see them as our brothers, and we're so sorry.
Thank you, Teisha. I appreciate it.
So, Almog, the IDF has struck over 100 terror targets in Gaza belonging to Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Now there are reports, and there's nothing confirmed yet, that there may have been a ceasefire reached. So we hear that, and then we see there are apparently protests happening. Some residents of the South feel like this is not the outcome they want. There are people in the government and in the opposition who say this is not the outcome they want. What is the alternative, really, as opposed to does Israel want to engage in another operation in Gaza, another, that could lead to a war like we saw in 2014? Is a ceasefire the best choice at the moment? What are some of the options, or are there any at this point?
So just to give you an update from the recent minutes, so there is currently, from what I also understand here in New York, a ceasefire that was brokered with a few countries and with the UN also. I know that the schools in Israel, because I told you there was no school and 250,000 Israeli children couldn't learn, so we're back now to normal school and schedule and everything. So for now, there's a ceasefire, and it looks like it's going to be quiet, hopefully. I hope so. In terms of the Israeli government, I think at times like this, what we need to do is we need to trust the government. We need to trust the cabinet and the IDF, that they know what they're doing. Normally when something like this happens, such as yesterday and the day before, you have the security cabinet that gets together. They are briefed by the IDF. They are briefed by security officials. They are briefed about the attacks, about the extent of operations against the terrorists in Gaza. So there's a protocol, there's instructions on how to move forward. And, you mentioned the protests and the residents in the South. At the end of the day, of course, they feel traumatized by what's going on, and I can feel what they feel probably being there. But there's a large population in Israel. Everyone feels different about what's the right way to move forward, and I think in this case you just have to trust the government and the IDF that they probably know what they are doing and how they're thinking, and there's some strategic long-term thinking behind the action.
Right, absolutely, and I'm sure there is a lot that we don't know that goes into making such a decision, and as you said, we'll just trust that this is the best path at the moment. Almog, what are your feelings about the response you've heard from the United States condemning, of course, the rockets, and also from the international community? Several countries have made their support for Israel known. How's that been?
I think it makes us stronger, and it's important. We need the international community to condemn Hamas and to condemn their actions. It's 100% a terror organization, and, part of Hamas's goal and ideology is the destruction of Israel, period. It's not something they're hiding. It's not a secret. They're actually very proud of it. It's not something that we can accept, and I think the international community needs definitely to do more. I was very happy to see that the U.S. Condemned the attack, and also different ambassadors in Israel, as well as the EU ambassador to Israel. We had different world leaders, also in Europe, condemning the attack. So it's something that makes us stronger, and it's also important because at the end of the day, someone needs to hold Hamas accountable for their actions, really. And I think that more pressure needs to be exercised. And I hope that more leaders will condemn those attacks. And, at the end of the day, what we really want from Hamas is, it's simple. We want them to see the right of Israel to exist, to recognize it. And we would like them to really demonstrate that the priority is the welfare of their own people and not the destruction of our people. That's it. It's simple as that.
Yeah. The other side, of course, the UN Security Council held an emergency meeting later this afternoon with countries that do not necessarily support Israel. And Israel's ambassador to the UN, Danny Danon, made also, I think, a very powerful statement. He said, because you always hear in these situations, we call for both sides to show restraint. And Danon said, we will not accept a call for both sides to exercise restraint. There is one side that attacks and fires 400 missiles at civilian populations, now close to 500, you said, or over 500. And there is another side that protects its citizens. He said every member of the Security Council should ask themselves how they would respond after a barrage of missiles on their country. So how do you respond when you hear criticism of Israel? Because obviously there always is. There are always those who say Israel should show restraint, Israel is using too much force. How do you respond? How do you answer that kind of criticism?
Look, I think it's okay to criticize Israel. Whoever wants to criticize Israel has the right to do it outside of Israel and inside of Israel. It's very important, and that's what's also making us a strong democracy. But I think people need to understand that at the end of the day, we need to take care of our citizens. The government needs to do it, and I think that every government would react the same way as Israel does, because when your residents feel threatened, they don't only feel it, they are threatened. That's the only way to act. And in terms of support, I think this time we did receive a lot of support, which is really appreciated. And I can tell you also, my ambassador, the Consul General, Danny Dayan, who also, of course, was in touch here with the Jewish community leaders and with different important leaders within New York, we received a lot of statements, a lot of support condemning the attacks. And if you want to criticize Israel on the way they act, it's your right to do it. But at the end of the day, we need to look after ourselves, and we need to look after our citizens. And living in a place where you're 2 miles away, so what is 2 miles away from the border, where you have rockets coming in, tunnels that are digged on daily basis, tunnels to smuggle weapons into Israel, to kidnap, to kill Israeli civilians. When you have 15 seconds to go to a shelter, when you don't know what's going to happen, it's not a normal situation. And I think Israel's doing the best to try and maintain the situation as quiet as possible.
And you mentioned, of course, Consul General Danny Dayan, who's been on JBS, and we appreciate him so much. And I just wanted to mention, for those people who don't know, is that the Consul General was just in Pittsburgh last week. He was there for the funerals of the Jews who were killed at the Tree of Life Synagogue. He was there for the part of the Shiva.
He was actually there twice. Yeah, yes. He went there on the Saturday. It happened. He arrived at nighttime. He was the first Israeli official to arrive at the scene. He stayed there for a couple of days. He came back to New York. He was in New York, I think, only 48 hours, and then he went back to Pittsburgh.
It's so important that he was there, and he also made a statement. I'm trying to remember now exactly what he said, but it was something to the effect of, there's no geographic distance when a Jew is harmed. It's, you know, whether it's in Israel or in Pittsburgh or anywhere in the world, that it's the closeness. We're all one people, and I was very touched by that and by his presence in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, what he said is that it's domestic issues that what happened in Pittsburgh is a domestic issues for Israelis and for Israel, and it's true. It's true because we see the American Jews as an extension of Israel, and we see them as part of our family. We are one big family, a family that doesn't always agree on everything, but at the end of the day, we belong to each other. And I think that's why, you know, he didn't have to go twice. He didn't have to be there for that long, but he wanted to do it because that's how he feels, and that's how we all feel. And I can tell you his deputy was there as well for some of the funerals. I was actually in Pittsburgh a couple of months ago, and I absolutely loved the community. Had a great time, had a really, really good time. And I'm also planning to go back and, of course, visit the families. So we're all here for them.
And I just want to talk a bit about the resilience of the people of Israel. And, you know, something like this happens, the rocket barrage, just going back to that for a moment, 2 days of absolute fear and terror. And then you find a way, and you pick up and you send your kids to school again in the morning, and you go back to your jobs because that's just what you do. And I think for people who have not lived in Israel, it's a kind of an amazing thing, this ability to go on. And tonight there was a night run in Tel Aviv. It was going to be canceled, and they said, no, we're not going to cancel it. We're going to run. We're going to run in solidarity. We don't cancel our plans. We don't surrender to terror. Can you speak a bit about that resiliency that we see from Israelis?
Yeah, I think one of the most amazing thing about Israelis is that we're very optimistic. We always look into the future, and we love life. We absolutely love life. We enjoy life, and we're not going to let anything, you know, take us down or ruin our mood or our day-to-day routine. And I think we're strong. We're a very strong country, and I think our strength also derives from each other, because we go through those things together, because most of us in Israel served in the army or did some sort of national service for the country, and we feel that we're all together in this conflict, especially at hard times. And I think we just want to be optimistic, and we want to continue with our lives. And maybe it sounds weird or a little bit odd to someone from the side who didn't experience it, but I think that's what Judaism is also about, being together and looking forward and valuing life. And
looking for the positive, absolutely.
Exactly, 100%.
Well, I really, truly hope that there's positive news coming out of Israel in the next few days. I'm pleased that you said that there is a ceasefire that has been agreed to, brokered by Egypt, I believe, as well as the United Nations. Can you? Okay. And
yeah, I believe it's Egypt, the UN, and Norway.
Ah, interesting. Okay. Well,
but I'm not 100% sure, so don't take me on it. But yeah, there is a ceasefire.
Well, that's good news. We're going to take that as good news for tonight, and hope that the ceasefire holds, and hope that it can lead to not just a temporary halt of fire from Gaza, but something more long-term, that Israelis and the Palestinians can live in a reality that is not one marked by this kind of violence. So I truly hope that that is the case. And I would love to speak to you again soon and follow up, and hopefully with some good news.
Thank you so much, Teisha. I appreciate it, and thank you for the interview and for the concern. And I also hope it's going to be a quiet night for the south of Israel and for all Israelis in general.
We as well. Thank you, Almog. And our thoughts and support, as always, are with the people of Israel. And as I said, we hope for better news in the coming days, and we will speak to you again soon. And thank you so very much, and to the Consul General, Dani Dayan, for the work that you all do on a daily basis.
Thank you so much, Teisha.
Thank you. Almog Elijis is the spokesperson and consul for media affairs for the Consulate of Israel in New York. We thank her so much for her time and her expertise. And as always, many thanks to our director, Sloan Copeland, JBS Associate Director, Dara Golub, our editor, John McDevitt, and producer, Carol Lilienthal. I'm Teisha Bader on this edition of In the News.